Are Ohio State's problems surface level, or are they deeply ingrained in their staff and players? Do you think Ohio State has many, if any, problems? First of all,
I think that they have a lot of mental and just programmable issues that they have to leap over this year in order to be where a lot of people are projecting them to be. They've lost to Michigan for 3 straight years. That's a fact. You can't ignore that. They've just had trouble with playing against good SEC opponents. That's a fact. Let's go back to Mizzou last year. You could give all sorts of excuses. They just have issues with these problems. So yes, they do have these problems. I think the big question is, are these problems going to be addressed in season? Because next season, let's say this coming season, let's say they lose to Michigan and they don't win the national championship. Are people going to be calling for Ryan Day's head? Personally, I wouldn't do that, but that's kind of the sentiment around the program, is that it's really win big or go home. So, yeah, do they have problems? Yes. I think that they're deep, but not as deep as some people might say, because I think that they can be overcome. But those are my thoughts on it.
I'm largely in lockstep with you. I think that the people, first and foremost, who think that Ryan Day should be on the hot seat, just lay off whatever pills you're taking, please. Again, 56-8 and 39-3 in the Big Ten. Now, I get, again, the lack of competition or the lack of follow through against SEC opponents in Michigan. What you brought up is a great point, because whether it's Missouri last year, Georgia in 22, whether it's Alabama in 20, a Clemson kind of in their own realm in terms of the fact that it was Ryan Day's first year and that team had a generational QB. And 2019, honestly, was in a different era of college football. But that loss to Clemson, which many criticized Ryan Day's game management and being super conservative in that game, and against physical teams, but especially Michigan, who's, along with Georgia, been the most physical team in the country over the past 3 seasons since the COVID year. Oregon in 2021, Michigan in 21, 22, and 23. And right there, we've named all of Ryan Day's 8 losses. All of them were to teams that finished ranked in the top 25. And if you take out Oregon, all of those teams finished ranked in the top 10. In fact, all of them finished ranked outside of Missouri and Oregon, so 6 of those teams in the top 5. And 2 of them were 3 of them, actually, were national champions. So Ryan Day is not the GOAT coach. I think we can all agree on that. But he's not a bum. And I'm sorry, but yeah, he was born on third base in the sense of, like, he inherited all these things, but that doesn't make him a villain, especially when, I'm sorry, his current program is better than what Meyer had at the end of his tenure. There's been no blowout loss to Purdue. There's been no Brian Ferentz like tap dancing on your table as he just beats you to death. 55-24 in Kinnick Stadium is disgusting. There's been no loss to James Franklin. That 2016 team for Ohio State was embarrassing with the talent that it had. There's been no shutout loss in the college football playoff. The Cotton Bowl loss last season was the closest thing to that, and that was way more competitive than the semifinal game against Clemson in 2016. I think Ohio State's problems, like what you said, they're very fixable, but they're very much related, I think, to the head coach and to one in particular of the Urban Meyer holdovers. I think that Mickey Marotti, and maybe I'll catch heat for this, I think he needs to do a better job. You have the third, or some could consider second, maybe the most, if you're factoring in returning production more than high school recruiting rankings. They may have the most talented roster in the country this year, the best roster in the country. In fact, EA Sports College Football Game has them as the only 99 overall team. And yet, what have we seen the previous 2, 3 seasons, even in 2020? So you could say the previous 4. We've seen a lack of physicality, at least on one side of the ball, every year. Until last year, it was always the defense. And in 21, 22, and especially 23, it was the offense. It was. At 21 and 22, I won't criticize too much, especially 22, because that O-line was vicious. And I think the 2022 offense, if managed better, would have been like 2019 LSU level if it was managed better and was healthy. But going back to the trench play and the health of the team, that ties, right? Doesn't that tie back to the strength and conditioning coach? What do you think? Strength and the ability to like not be exhausted, to not be injured, especially in like high frequency numbers like Smith and Jigba, Henderson, Williams, all dropping like flies. Or am I going off the rails here with that?
That's what's built premier programs, though. You look at Michigan, built on strength and conditioning, obviously recruiting and transfer portal and all this. But you look at it, the bare bones of a premier program. Go to Alabama, a couple years ago, but even going back to the 2010s. Look at Georgia. These teams are built on strength and conditioning and having elite strength and conditioning, along with recruiting, along with player development. But really, it's how you build a premier program. And Ohio State has been doing a bit better job of that. And Ohio State has been building their program to really beat Michigan, becoming more physical and all that. But if they do want to overcome these hurdles, they have to be up there with Michigan and Alabama and Georgia when it comes to strength and conditioning, player development. They can recruit out the wazoo. They can throw as much money to players as they want to. But without player development and without strength and conditioning, it's going to be extremely hard. You're just making it so much harder on yourself to beat Michigan, to beat Bama, to beat Georgia, and these elite teams.
Yeah. And again, Ohio State's strength and conditioning program isn't bad. It's good.
Right.
It's great. It may even be near elite. But it's behind Michigan's. It's behind Georgia's. I don't exactly know if it's behind Alabama's, but Alabama has still put out better draft results. And they've actually beaten Georgia, like one of the most physical teams in the country, in the previous 2 seasons. And I think they've had worse assistants, in my opinion, at least. And if you're Ohio State and you're trying to be the best of the best, then great isn't good enough. Near elite, most of the time, isn't good enough. Occasionally you can have a position or two, or maybe a coach or a few who aren't the best of the best or competing for that in their realm. That's okay. Michigan, their wide receivers have never been elite over the previous 3 seasons. Never. For Ohio State, that's largely been the case, not at exactly one position, but you can point to different positions. It's just concerning to me that Ryan Day has taken care of all the assistants, all the coordinators, but I haven't heard too many big changes at strength and conditioning. I just haven't. And with Ohio State, last recruiting class, they only brought in two high school offensive linemen. One was a low-level 4-star, the other was a 3-star, and they brought in Seth McLaughlin. They have been recruiting worse and worse every year at the O-line. They haven't developed exactly well. The defensive lines are still great. They very well will probably be elite this year, but they haven't been the same as those Urban Meyer defensive lines, and they're still suffering injuries. I mean, Ibuka and Henderson last year, injured at times. Julian Fleming wasn't as consistent. Lathan Ransom, big-time starter. He got hurt. Michael Hall, yet again, was consistently hurt. And Ryan Day is, like you said, trying to make this team more physical and more like Michigan. And in some aspects, that's good. But this team, whether it's recruiting, whether it's current coaching, or whether it's the fact that, frankly, they're just more talented than Michigan in terms of what they can do. They can be more versatile on offense than Michigan can be. Heck, they can probably be more versatile and adaptive on defense as well because they have better talent, a better baseline of talent. I think that they're limiting their ceiling, and in fact, they may even be playing into what is still a current weakness by trying to be overly physical. Like, being physical is good, but you have to have the right ingredients to bake the perfect cake. And I don't know if they have the right ingredients right now to do that.
And I mean, look, they recruit all the extras. They recruit all the luxuries. They get all the 5-star wide receivers, all the 5-star quarterbacks. Just look at their quarterback room. It's loaded. But you need to, especially in the Big Ten, and they found out the hard way, having really, if you go back to 21 and 22, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, you had all three of those, and you still lost. You got beat by Michigan. You lost to Michigan twice with elite first-round receivers, and you need players around those receivers. You need players on the offensive line. You need development at the offensive line. You need players at running back. You need to play a better style of football than just using all of your luxury resources and not using your foundational resources as much. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and they had, I mean, whether it's Nicholas Petit-Fryer, whether it's Luke Whippler, whether it's Paris Johnson Jr., I just named 3 Ohio State offensive linemen over the past 3 seasons, really 2 from 21 and 22, who went to the NFL or who did well at their pro day, at the combine. And there are more. Like, they've had players. And I think that's where I tie this all back to strength and conditioning or poor scheme. And I think Chip Kelly coming in fixes the scheme aspect on offense. Jim Knowles has fixed it on defense. But Georgia has the better strength and conditioning. They have the better head coach. Many of their players have experienced playing at a championship level and being physically dominant. Ohio State in their big moments has mostly been physically dominated under Day. And that's that. But then again, Kirby Smart's teams before his national title in 21 were largely out-schemed, especially when it came to the offensive side of the ball before he hired Todd Monken. So I just think that different coaches, different situations, different programs, you're going to have a diverse amount of questions and problems that need to be solved. I think Ryan Day likely will figure it out at some point, but this wasn't the year, I think, for him to take a look and make changes at strength and conditioning. But
yeah,
that's really my opinion. I think those things can be fixed, and even in spite of all of that, I think Ohio State's one of the best teams in the country, primarily because of their defense, their wide receiver core, and their running back room. And the fact that Ryan Days finally became a CEO and is no longer going to be calling plays. Thank you all so much for watching this clip of Touchdown Talk. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and comment your reaction down below. That way College Football with Sam can continue to grow and you can get the best experience out of college football content on YouTube. I would like to give a shout out to my Patreon members for sponsoring this channel and video. Thanks to Crash2488 and Braska Rascal for being Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane and Connor Little OH for being All-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for being all-conference members. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you back soon. Bye-bye.